Picture this. You're standing in a ballroom filled with 200 of the wealthiest people in the Hamptons. You're wearing a cream Valentino gown, and your husband's mistress just poured an $800 bottle of wine all over you. Your husband doesn't defend you. He blames you, calls you unstable, dramatic, in front of everyone. But here's what nobody in that room knows. Not your cruel husband, not his smirking mistress, not even you. You already own the $47 million mansion they're standing in. You just don't know it yet. In the next 90 minutes, you're about to witness the most savage takedown in Hampton's history. A dying billionaire, a secret pregnancy, a slap heard round the world, and a woman who discovers that the power to change everything was in her hands all along. This is the true story of how one humiliating moment became the beginning of the most satisfying revenge you'll ever hear. A story about finding your strength when the world tells you you're powerless, about protecting what matters most, and about the man who told a broken woman how to fight back. Stay with me through every twist, every betrayal, every moment of justice, because I promise you, this ending is worth it. And if you love stories where the underdog finally wins, hit that like button now. You're going to want to remember this one. The sound came first, a splash like water hitting marble, then a woman's voice dripping with contempt. That's what you get for existing, you pathetic little mouse. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed. And then a man's voice, cold and dismissive. Sarah, Jesus Christ, stop being so dramatic. The phone camera shook as it captured the scene. A woman in a cream gown stood frozen, red wine spreading across the fabric like blood. The liquid dripped onto white marble floors, while 200 guests watched in horror. The view counter in the corner climbed steadily. 500,000, 1 million, 2 million. Comments scrolled past faster than anyone could read them. Who pours wine on someone like that? Preston Mitchell is garbage. Wait, is she pregnant? Her hand went to her stomach. Someone help her! The video cut to black. Then news anchors appeared on split screens. A viral video from a Hamptons charity gala has ignited a national conversation about infidelity, wealth, and justice, a CNN anchor announced. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling may be even more shocking. The screen showed an aerial view of a massive white colonial mansion on the Southampton waterfront, 40 acres of manicured lawns, a circular driveway packed with luxury cars. Text appeared over the image. The Ashford Estate, Southampton, New York, valued at $47 million. Another line of text, but who really owns it? The title card appeared 6 hours earlier. Sarah Mitchell sat on the bathroom floor of her small Brooklyn apartment, staring at the third positive pregnancy test she had taken that week. Her hands shook as she set it down next to the others. She picked up her phone, pulled up Preston's contact, then stopped. What would she even say? The flashbacks came unbidden. Her wedding day 5 years ago. Preston on his phone during their vows, barely looking at her. Preston introducing her at his company party. This is Sarah, she does interior stuff. Preston asking why she always made everything so difficult. Preston coming home at midnight, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the photo on her nightstand. Her mother smiled back at her, taken 2 months before the cancer took her. 2 years gone, and the grief still felt fresh some mornings. Her calendar hung on the wall next to the mirror. Today's date was circled in red, Memorial Day Gala, written in her careful handwriting. Below it, in pencil, barely visible, 12 weeks. Her phone buzzed, a text from Preston. Don't embarrass me tonight. Wear the Valentino I sent, and smile for once. Sarah closed her eyes and touched her stomach. She whispered to the baby that didn't know it existed yet. My mom always said marry for love, not money. I did. I married Preston when he was just an analyst making $90,000 a year, before his dad brought him into the family business. Back when he looked at me like I was his whole world. She stood up slowly, catching her reflection in the mirror. That was 5 years ago. Feels like 50. The phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen. Sarah answered on speaker. Please tell me you're not still going to that party, Melissa said without preamble. Charles invited me personally. He's always been kind to me. Charles is dying, babe, and Preston's already planning how to spend the inheritance. Sarah walked to her closet and pulled out the dress. Oh. Cream Valentino, tag still attached. $8,500 according to the price tag. She looked closer and her stomach dropped. Rent the runway. Return by June 2nd. Preston had told her he bought it for her. Another small lie. Another tiny cut. Sarah, you still there? Melissa's voice pulled her back. I have to tell Preston about the baby. Maybe it'll change things. Melissa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. Honey, men like Preston don't change. They just get better lawyers. I have to try. For this baby, every child deserves a father who wants them. Does Preston want anything that's not about Preston? Sarah's voice broke. I'll be fine. It's just one night. I'm coming with you. I don't trust him. I'm your +1 and your attorney. If that son of a bitch tries anything, I'm documenting everything. After they hung up, Sarah touched her stomach again. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll protect you. I promise. Another text arrived, this one from Charles Ashford. Sarah, looking forward to seeing you tonight. We need to talk. Important. Charles. Sarah stared at the message. Charles had always been kind to her, treating her with more warmth than his own son ever had. But important felt ominous. A third text came through. Preston again. Dad's been asking about you. Just agree with whatever he says and don't make it weird. Sarah set down the phone and looked at the pregnancy tests lined up on the bathroom counter. 3 pink lines. 3 confirmations. 3 reasons everything was about to change. She just didn't know how much. The Uber pulled up to the massive iron gates of the Ashford estate just as the sun began its golden descent toward the horizon. Sarah stepped out first, smoothing her rented Valentino gown. Melissa emerged behind her, already eyeing everything with the practiced suspicion of a divorce attorney who had seen too many ugly endings. A security guard approached with a clipboard. Name? Sarah Mitchell, +1. The guard checked his list, then looked up with a warmer expression. Mrs. Mitchell, of course. Welcome home. Sarah blinked. I don't live here. Mr. Ashford asked me to tell you he'd like to see you in the study before the event begins. Melissa leaned close and whispered, That's weird, right? The gate swung open, revealing the estate in its full glory. White columns rose 3 stories high. The circular driveway was already packed with cars that cost more than most people's houses. A Bentley Continental, a Tesla Model X, a Porsche Taycan. Valets in crisp uniforms moved between them with practiced efficiency. Women glided past in Chanel and Carolina Herrera, their jewelry catching the light. Men stood in clusters, wearing Tom Ford and Brioni suits, holding crystal glasses of champagne. A 12-piece orchestra played Vivaldi on the terrace. Ice sculptures shaped like swans flanked the entrance. A passing guest noticed them staring. Last year's Memorial Day Gala raised $4.2 million for children's hospitals, the woman said cheerfully. Charles Ashford doesn't do anything small. Melissa muttered under her breath, Jesus, how much is this party costing? Sarah didn't answer. She was looking at the house, trying to remember the last time she had been here. Preston's birthday, maybe 6 months ago. He had barely spoken to her that night either. A butler appeared at the entrance. Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Ashford is waiting for you in the study. If you'd like to follow me. Sarah glanced at Melissa, who nodded. They followed the butler through marble hallways lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Every surface gleamed. Every corner whispered old money. The butler stopped at a heavy wooden door and knocked twice. Come in. Charles's voice, still strong despite the illness. The door opened to reveal a wood-paneled study filled with floor-to-ceiling law books. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center, and behind it sat Charles Ashford. He looked thinner than the last time Sarah had seen him. His face was drawn, his skin pale, but his eyes were sharp and clear as he gestured to the chair across from him. Sarah, close the door. Sarah obeyed, her heart hammering. Melissa stayed by the door, giving them space but watching carefully. Charles, is everything okay? Preston said you wanted to see me. Preston doesn't know I asked for you. Sit. She sat. Charles studied her face for a long moment. Then he said something that made her freeze. How are you feeling? I'm fine. His gaze didn't waver. Are you? I don't understand what you're asking. You're not drinking champagne tonight. You touched your stomach 3 times during our last conversation at Easter. And you have that glow my late sister had when she was pregnant. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Charles's expression softened. Does Preston know? I was going to tell him tonight. I thought maybe if he knew we were having a baby, he might love you again. The tears spilled over. Sarah tried to wipe them away, but they kept coming. Charles stood slowly, came around the desk, and pulled her into an embrace. It was the first genuine affection she had received in months, and it broke something open inside her. I need to tell you something, Charles said quietly. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. 6 months. Maybe 8 if I'm lucky. Sarah pulled back, shocked. Oh my God, Charles. Preston knows. I told him 3 months ago. His response was to ask me to sign over power of attorney so he could protect the assets while I'm mentally compromised. That's horrible. It clarified something for me. Charles returned to his chair, moving carefully. I built a $4 billion empire, Sarah. Tech patents, real estate, investments. I always assumed Preston would inherit it, carry on the legacy. He paused, looking at her intently. But legacy isn't about blood. It's about character. And my son has none. Sarah didn't know what to say to that. Charles pulled a folder from his desk drawer. I need you to know something before tonight begins. 5 years ago, on your wedding day, I transferred ownership of this property. I know Preston's been asking you about the estate. I didn't transfer it to Preston. Silence. I transferred it to you. Sarah stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over. What? This estate, the 40 acres, the mansion, the beach access, legal value $47 million. It's been in your name for 5 years, in an irrevocable trust. You're the sole beneficiary. That's impossible. I would have signed something. I would have known. The trust was established as a wedding gift. My attorneys handled everything. It was designed to protect you. Protect me from what? Charles looked at her with something that might have been sadness or regret. From my son. The words hung in the air. Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was saying. I saw how he treated you even at your wedding, Charles continued, taking calls during your vows, dismissing your family, introducing you as an afterthought. I knew if I gave him this property, he'd use it as leverage, as control. So I gave it to you instead. Insurance. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I wanted you to stay with Preston if he deserved you. I gave him 5 years to prove himself. Charles coughed, a deep rattling sound that made Sarah flinch. He failed. Charles, this is too much. I can't accept. Tonight, Preston is going to humiliate you. I don't know how yet, but I know my son. He's been distant, cruel, spending money on someone else. I can feel it. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Her name is Amber. I've known for 6 months. Charles's eyes flashed with anger. Is she here? Tonight? Preston said she's his colleague, but yes, I think so. Then tonight you'll have to make a choice. Endure it silently, like you've been doing, or use the power I'm giving you. He handed her the folder. Inside were legal documents with her name on every page. Deeds, titles, trust agreements. This is your home, Sarah. Not his, not mine, yours. Remember that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Before Charles could respond, Preston walked in. Dad, there you are. Guests are asking for you. He noticed Sarah and his expression hardened. Oh, Sarah, what are you doing in here? I invited her, Charles said calmly. The party's outside, Sarah. Go mingle. Sarah found a small voice. Your father wanted to speak with me. Preston turned to Charles. About what? Estate matters. Nothing that concerns you. Preston forced a laugh. Everything about the estate concerns me, Dad. I'm your heir. Charles met his son's eyes. Are you? The tension in the room thickened. Preston's jaw clenched. He grabbed Sarah's arm. Let's go. You're making this awkward. Remove your hand from her. Immediately. Charles's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Preston released Sarah as if she had burned him. Go back to your party, Preston. Sarah will join when she's ready. Preston looked between them, his face reddening. Then he leaned close to Sarah and whispered low enough that only she could hear. We're going to talk about this later. He left, slamming the door behind him. Charles waited until the footsteps faded. That's what I mean. Control, ownership. He doesn't see you as a partner. He sees you as a possession. Sarah was shaking. I should go. The baby, the stress isn't good. I know, but hear me. Tonight, when he shows you who he really is, believe him, and use the power you have. Sarah clutched the folder to her chest and nodded, even though she didn't fully understand what Charles was asking of her. Not yet, but she would. The ballroom was everything money could buy and taste could refine. Crystal chandeliers reflected light across marble floors, so polished they looked like mirrors. The orchestra played something classical and expensive sounding. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. 200 guests mingled in designer clothes, their voices creating a sophisticated hum beneath the music. Sarah stood at the edge of it all, still processing what Charles had told her. The folder was back in the study. She couldn't risk Preston seeing it, but the knowledge sat heavy in her chest. This house was hers, had been for 5 years, and she never knew. Melissa found her near the champagne tower. What was that about? You look like you've seen a ghost. Charles told me something impossible. What? Sarah glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I'll tell you later. Right now, I just need to find Preston and tell him about the baby before I lose my nerve. She scanned the crowd and spotted him near the bar. He was laughing with a group of men in expensive suits, all of them holding drinks and looking pleased with themselves. And next to him stood Amber Sinclair. Sarah had only seen her in photos before, social media posts Preston thought he had deleted carefully enough. But there she was in person, late 20s, platinum blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders. She wore a red bandage dress that looked painted on, and Louboutin heels so high they should have been dangerous. Jewelry glittered at her throat and wrists. Melissa followed Sarah's gaze. Oh, hell no. Is that her? That's her. Preston's arm was around Amber's waist, casual, possessive. His thumb stroked her hip in small circles. They looked comfortable together, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Sarah's hand went to her stomach without thinking. Come on, Melissa said. Let's get this over with. Sarah crossed the ballroom on unsteady legs. Preston saw her coming and didn't move his arm. She touched his shoulder. Can we talk? Privately? Preston didn't even look at her. Kind of busy, Sarah. Can it wait? It's important. Amber turned and extended her hand, her smile as sharp as glass. Hi, I'm Amber. You must be Sarah. Preston's mentioned you. Sarah shook the offered hand limply. His wife, yes. Amber's eyes widened in fake surprise. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Preston never wears his ring, so I assumed. Preston cut her off smoothly. Amber's my colleague from the Vanderbilt deal. Preston, I really need to talk to you. He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Sarah's yearly salary. I have investors to schmooze. What is it? Sarah glanced at Amber. Alone? Preston sighed like she was being unreasonable. Sarah, you're always so paranoid. Amber, give us a minute. Amber smiled sweetly. Of course, I'll go find the ladies' room. She walked away with deliberate sway in her hips. Every man in the vicinity noticed. The moment they were alone, Preston's demeanor shifted. He softened his voice, touched Sarah's cheek with practiced gentleness. Hey, sorry, work mode. You look beautiful tonight. Sarah was so surprised she nearly stepped back. He hadn't complimented her in months. Really? You said this dress makes me look... I was stressed. The Vanderbilt deal's worth $40 million. You know how I get. Sarah wanted desperately to believe him. I know, but I love you. You know that, right? Tears formed before she could stop them. Do you? Preston pulled her close, a public display of affection. Several guests glanced their way and smiled approvingly. Sarah whispered into his shoulder, Preston, I need to tell you something important. Preston! Amber's voice rang out across the ballroom. She hurried back toward them, face flushed with excitement. The Vanderbilts are asking for you. They want to discuss the Shanghai contracts. Preston released Sarah immediately. "'Kay, coming." He kissed Sarah's forehead, the first real affection in weeks. Hold that thought. We'll talk later tonight, okay? I promise. Then he was gone, his arm returning to Amber's waist as if it had never left. They disappeared into the crowd together. Melissa appeared at Sarah's elbow. Did he just love bomb you and then ditch you for her? Sarah watched them across the room. Preston leaned down to whisper something in Amber's ear. They both laughed. His hand dropped lower to Amber's hip, to her ass. He squeezed. Amber leaned into him. He said he loves me, Sarah said hollowly. Sarah, babe, look at him. I was going to tell him about the baby. Don't, not here, not like this. Sarah felt something breaking inside her chest. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe she really is just a colleague. His hand is literally on her ass right now. Sarah saw it. Undeniable. Public. He didn't even care enough to hide it anymore. She retreated to the champagne tower, trying to breathe, trying not to cry, trying to hold herself together for just a few more hours. That's when Amber found her. So Sarah, can I call you Sarah? Sarah turned. Amber stood there holding 2 glasses of red wine. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. What do you want? Just to chat, woman to woman. I don't think we have anything to talk about. Amber stepped closer. How does it feel? Excuse me? Being the placeholder, the starter wife, the one who gets traded in when the husband finally makes real money. Sarah's hands clenched. I don't know what Preston told you, but he told me everything. How you trapped him with emotional manipulation when he was broke. How you refused to sign a post-nuptial agreement even though his lawyers have been asking for 2 years. How you're bleeding his family dry with your little design business that doesn't make any money. That's not true. None of that. You know what the sad part is? Amber gestured around the ballroom. You actually think you belong here. Look around, Sarah. Hermes Birkins, Harry Winston diamonds, women who summered in the Hamptons their entire lives. And then there's you. Community college, public school, dead-end job measuring curtains for rich people. Yeah, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design. Amber laughed. On scholarship, right? Let me guess. Your mom cleaned houses to pay the rest? Sarah's face gave her away. See, I can always tell. You have that hungry look, like you're still trying to prove you deserve to be in the room. Melissa tried to intervene. Okay, that's enough. But Amber ignored her, stepping even closer to Sarah. And that dress, Valentino, very nice. Except it's a rental. I checked the tag when you walked past. Rent the runway, right? Preston wouldn't spend $8,000 on you. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her side. The tag was visible if you knew where to look. Her face burned with humiliation. He told me he bought it. Amber's fake sympathy was worse than outright cruelty. Oh, honey, he tells you lots of things, like how he's working late. He's at my place, Tribeca, 3-bedroom penthouse. He bought it for me last year, $4.5 million. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about the dog. French bulldog named Bruno. Preston hates dogs, remember? But I wanted one, so he got me one. Because that's what you do for someone you actually love. Sarah's knees went weak. Preston had always refused to get a dog with her, said they were too much responsibility. Melissa grabbed Sarah's arm. Sarah, let's go. This bitch isn't worth. Amber reached out and plucked a glass of wine from a passing waiter's tray. Chateau Margaux, 2015, $800 a bottle. You know what, Sarah? I'm doing you a favor. Sarah backed away. Don't. You need to understand your place. So let me make it crystal clear. Amber raised the glass high. This is an $800 bottle of wine. That's more than your rent in that shitty Brooklyn apartment, right? Time seemed to slow. Sarah watched the glass tilt, watched the dark red liquid begin to pour, watched it arc through the air in a perfect stream. The wine hit her chest and spread instantly, soaking through the cream Valentino-like blood. Cold and wet and humiliating. Gasps erupted around them. The orchestra hit a wrong note and stopped. 200 guests turned as one. Phones came up. At least 30 people started recording. Wine dripped onto the marble floor. Sarah stood frozen, trembling, unable to move or speak or think. Amber's voice rang out, loud enough for everyone to hear. There, now you look like you belong. covered in something expensive that someone else paid for. The ballroom fell into shocked silence, and somewhere in that silence, someone whispered, "Where's Charles? Someone needs to get Charles." Preston rushed over, his face a mask of concern that Sarah might have believed if she hadn't just watched his hand on Amber's ass minutes before. "What the hell, Amber?" Amber's transformation was instant. Her smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed innocence. She pressed a hand to her chest. "She lunged at me. I was defending myself." Preston turned on Sarah, and that's when she knew for certain. He believed Amber, or he wanted to believe her, or he didn't care about the truth at all. "Jesus Christ, Sarah, what did you say to her?" Sarah couldn't form words. The wine was cold against her skin, seeping through the expensive rental dress. Her hands shook. The entire room watched her fall apart. "I said nothing. She just, you're always starting drama. This is exactly why I can't take you anywhere." Melissa pushed through the crowd, her phone already out. "Are you kidding me right now? Your mistress just assaulted your wife and you're blaming her?" Preston's face reddened. "Mistress? Amber's my colleague. Sarah's just paranoid because I'm what, Preston?" Sarah found her voice finally. It came out stronger than she expected. Preston lowered his voice, but the room was so quiet everyone heard him anyway. "Unstable. Your therapist said you have anxiety issues. I went to grief counseling after my mother died. And you've been different ever since. Emotional, irrational, making scenes at family events." A woman nearby whispered to her husband, "Did he just gaslight her in public?" Another guest muttered, "Where's Charles? Someone needs to tell Charles." Jordan Klein, a tech journalist Sarah vaguely recognized from Preston's work events, was already typing furiously on his phone. The hashtag appeared seconds later. "Ashford scandal." Melissa had her phone to her ear. "Yes, I need to report an assault. 485 Meadow Lane, Southampton. A woman just threw wine on another woman at a private event. Yes, I have video. Multiple witnesses." Amber's face went pale. "You can't call the cops on me. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, Melissa said coldly. "You're about to be arrested." Vivian Ashford, Preston's mother, materialized from the crowd. She was 65 and dressed in Chanel, every silver hair in place. Her face a practiced mask of concern. "Everyone calm down. This is a misunderstanding. Sarah, dear, why don't you go clean up? I didn't do anything wrong." Sarah's voice was still shaking, but she didn't back down. "Of course not. But you're making a scene and the guests are uncomfortable." "She's making a scene?" Melissa's voice could have cut glass. "Amber just committed battery in front of 200 people. Vivian turned to the security staff hovering nearby. "Escort Mrs. Mitchell to the guest house. Quietly." "She's not going anywhere," Melissa snapped. That's when the ballroom doors opened. Charles Ashford appeared in the doorway. The effect was immediate and absolute. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Waiters froze with trays balanced on their hands. The orchestra conductor lowered his baton. Every eye in the room turned to the old man with the cane, moving slowly but with undeniable command. His voice, when he spoke, carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. "What is happening in my home?" The crowd parted like water as he walked through. He moved directly to Sarah, his face unreadable. He looked at her wine-soaked dress, the tears streaming down her face, her trembling hands. "Sarah, are you hurt?" She could barely speak. "I'm sorry, Charles. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Answer the question. Are you physically harmed?" "No, who did this?" No one spoke. Charles's voice rose, filling the massive room with the force of his anger. "I asked a question. Who did this?" Amber stepped forward, her confidence returning. She had charmed powerful men before. She could charm this dying old man. "Mr. Ashford, I'm so sorry for the disruption. I'm Amber Sinclair, Preston's colleague from the Vanderbilt deal. It was an accident. She bumped into me and the glass just slipped." "That's a lie." Melissa held up her phone. "I have video from 6 different angles showing you deliberately pouring wine on her." Charles turned to Melissa. "Who are you?" "Melissa Harper, Sarah's attorney and friend." "Her attorney is here?" "I came as her +1. Good thing, too." Charles studied Melissa for a moment, then seemed to approve. He turned to Preston, who stood next to Amber looking increasingly uncomfortable. You invited this woman to my home? Dad, Amber is important to the Vanderbilt deal. I don't give a damn about the Vanderbilt deal. Did you invite her? Yes, but is she your mistress? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Preston's face went from red to white. Dad, this isn't the time. Answer me, son. Is this woman your mistress? Preston's jaw worked. Sarah and I have been having problems. That's not an answer, Amber tried to interrupt. Mr. Ashford, Preston and I have a very special relationship. Charles held up one hand. I wasn't speaking to you. He turned back to Preston, and his voice dropped to something cold and deadly. Your wife is standing here, humiliated, covered in wine, in front of 200 guests, and you're defending the woman who assaulted her. Is that accurate? You're making this sound worse than it is. Is that accurate? Preston looked at the floor. Yes. I raised you better than this. Dad, if you just let me explain. Explain what? That you brought your whore to a family event? That you humiliated your wife publicly? That you've dishonored this family? She's not my whore, she's... The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Charles had hit Preston across the face with enough force to snap his head to the side. Preston stumbled back, hand flying to his cheek. The shock on his face was absolute. Vivian gasped, Charles! Charles didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Preston. You are no longer my son. Preston touched his reddening cheek, eyes wide. Dad, you can't. I absolutely can. And I do. Charles turned to the head of security. Bring me a microphone. Vivian tried to intervene. Charles, please, let's discuss this privately. We've been private for too long. These people deserve the truth. A portable microphone appeared. Charles's voice, amplified now, commanded absolute attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, but what you've witnessed tonight requires immediate address. 200 phones were recording. The live stream viewers were climbing by the second. This moment would be replayed millions of times before the night was over. For those who don't know me, I'm Charles Ashford. I built Ashford Technologies from a two-person startup in 1983 to a company worth $4.2 billion. I did it through hard work, integrity, and a belief that character matters more than profit. Scattered applause. Charles held up his hand for silence. I also built this estate, this house, these gardens, everything you see around you. I built it to be a legacy, a place where family would gather, where love would be honored. He paused, letting the weight settle. My son has turned it into a circus. Preston tried to speak. Dad, please don't do this. Do what? Tell the truth? You're afraid of the truth, Preston? You're not thinking clearly. Your cancer treatments, do not use my illness to excuse your behavior. Charles addressed the crowd again. Yes, I have cancer, stage 4 pancreatic, maybe 6 months left, which is why I'm choosing to spend those months with people who deserve it. He looked directly at Sarah. This property, 485 Meadow Lane, the Ashford estate, Preston has been asking me to sign it over to him for the past 18 months. He believes he's entitled to it, as the heir, as the firstborn son. Preston's face was pale now. It's family property. It was family property. Until 5 years ago. Charles pulled the folder from inside his jacket, the same folder he had shown Sarah less than an hour ago. On October 12th, 5 years ago, Preston's wedding day, I transferred full ownership of this property. A guest called out, to Preston? Charles paused for a long moment. No, hun. The silence was deafening. I transferred ownership to the Sarah Mitchell Irrevocable Trust, the sole beneficiary of which is my daughter-in-law, Sarah Mitchell. Stunned silence gave way to confused murmurs. Preston looked like he'd been struck again. That's impossible. Is it? Blake, would you verify? Blake Harper, the family attorney, stepped forward reluctantly. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit that suddenly looked uncomfortable. I didn't prepare those documents, Charles, because I used Kirkland and Ellis in Manhattan, specifically to avoid interference. Charles handed him the folder. Blake reviewed it, and the color drained from his face. These are legitimate, filed with Suffolk County Clerk on October 13th, 5 years ago. Deed transfer, title transfer, irrevocable trust established with Sarah A. Mitchell as sole beneficiary. Preston was shaking. You can't just give away a $47 million property. I can give my property to whomever I choose. Amber's voice was shrill. This is insane. Charles turned to her and his expression was arctic. You're trespassing on private property. Sarah's private property. Sarah stood frozen, wine still dripping from her dress, unable to process what was happening. Charles looked at her and his voice gentled. Sarah, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel obligated. I wanted you to stay with Preston because you loved him, not because you needed the house. He looked back at Preston with disgust. I gave him 5 years to prove he deserved you. He failed spectacularly. Then Charles did something that changed everything. The decision is yours now, Sarah. This is your home. Do you want them to stay? Or do you want them removed? Every eye in the ballroom turned to Sarah. She stood there, wine-soaked and trembling, 12 weeks pregnant with a secret only 3 people knew, holding legal claim to $47 million. Preston tried desperately to reach her. Sarah, please, let's talk about this rationally. Amber's mask had slipped entirely. You can't seriously be considering, Melissa whispered, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. It's your call, babe. Sarah found her voice. It shook, but it was clear. I want them to leave. The room erupted. Gasps, exclamations, phones recording every second. Charles nodded once. You heard Mrs. Mitchell. Security, please escort Mr. Preston Mitchell and Ms. Amber Sinclair off the property. They are no longer welcome. Preston lunged forward. Dad, you can't do this. I'm not doing anything. Sarah is. This is her home. I'm just a guest. Amber turned on Preston, her voice rising to a shriek that carried across the ballroom. You said this would work. You said your father would never give her anything. You promised me once you got the house we could... Preston grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. Shut up, Amber. Don't tell me to shut up. I gave up 2 years for you. The trips, the penthouse, the Cartier bracelet you said was an investment. I said shut up. Preston slapped Amber across the face. The collective gasp was even louder than when Charles had slapped him. 30 phones captured the moment in high definition. It would be on TMZ within the hour. Detective Rachel Morgan, who had been working event security in plain clothes, stepped forward. That's assault. Sir, put your hands behind your back. Preston's eyes went wild. What? No, I just watched you strike a woman in front of 200 witnesses. You're under arrest. The reality of the situation seemed to hit Preston all at once. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. His face went from red to white. He looked at his father. Dad, please, I'm your son. Charles's voice was flat. You were my son. As security led Preston toward the door, he twisted back towards Sarah, his face contorted with rage. This is all your fault. You ruined everything. Sarah found a strength she didn't know she had. Her voice carried across the silent room. No, Preston, you did that yourself. Amber was being questioned separately by Detective Morgan. Her makeup ran down her face in black streaks. Ma'am, are you pressing charges for the assault? Amber looked between Preston and the detective, calculating. I don't know, he's never done that before. And I'm pressing charges against her for assaulting my client, Melissa announced. Detective Morgan nodded. We'll take statements from everyone. I'm afraid this party's over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman in the crowd started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause. Sarah recognized her vaguely from previous events. One of the old Money Hamptons families. About damn time someone stood up to that little piece of work, the woman said clearly. Another guest joined the applause. Then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding Sarah. Not out of mockery, out of respect. Jordan Klein was posting in real time. Sarah could see his screen from where she stood. Breaking news. Billionaire Charles Ashford just revealed his daughter-in-law owns the $47 million Hamptons estate, then had his son arrested for assault. This is the wildest thing I've ever witnessed. Video coming. #Ashford scandal. The tweet already had 500,000 likes and climbing. Charles approached Sarah quietly while the police did their work. "How do you feel?" Sarah's laugh was slightly hysterical. "I don't know. I don't even know what just happened. You took back your power. Come with me. We need to talk privately." Melissa stayed close. "I'm coming too." Of course. They retreated to the study while the ballroom slowly emptied. Guests filed out, still recording, still posting, still talking. The story was already going viral. By morning, it would be national news. In the study, Sarah paced, her breathing rapid and shallow. The wine had dried stiff against her skin. She felt sticky and cold and completely overwhelmed. "Breathe, babe, just breathe," Melissa said. "I can't. This is too much. I can't breathe." Sarah collapsed into a chair, clutching her stomach. The movement made both Melissa and Charles freeze. "Sarah?" Charles's voice was sharp with concern. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Melissa already knew, but Charles's face showed genuine surprise, followed by something that looked like joy and sadness mixed together. "How far along?" he asked gently. 12 weeks. I was going to tell Preston tonight. Before all of this." Charles moved to kneel beside her chair, an effort that clearly cost him. "Does he know?" "No, and now I don't know if I want him to know. He'll use it. Try to get custody or control me or—" "Sarah, listen to me. Preston has no legal claim to your property. And after tonight, after assaulting someone in public on video, he'll be lucky to get a supervised visitation." "But he's the father," Melissa cut in. "He's a sperm donor. There's a difference." Sarah looked at Charles through her tears. "Why did you give me the house?" "Really?" Charles sat down heavily in his desk chair. "Because I saw what my son was becoming. Even on your wedding day, he was dismissive, taking calls during your vows, treating you like an obligation. I knew if I gave him this property, he'd use it to control you. So I gave it to you instead." "But you didn't tell me for 5 years. I wanted to see if he'd change, if love would be enough." "I was wrong." He coughed, the sound rattling deep in his chest. When he spoke again, his voice was weaker. "I'm dying, Sarah. 6 months, maybe less. That baby you're carrying will need protection. From Preston, from his mother, from everyone who'll try to use them as a pawn." "What are you saying?" Charles pulled out a new folder from his desk. "I'm revising my will. Everything. The foundation, the liquid assets, the investments. $4.2 billion. It's going to your child." Sarah stood up so fast she nearly fell. "Charles, no. With you as trustee until they turn 25. Because I know you'll teach them what matters, not the money, the character." Melissa whistled low. "Charles, that's incredibly generous. But Preston will contest. Let him try. I'm of sound mind. Blake will testify to that. And I'm making a video deposition tomorrow explaining exactly why I'm disinheriting my son." He coughed again, longer this time. "But we have to move fast. Preston will fight this. His mother will help him. They'll claim you're unfit, unstable, a gold digger." "We'll get ahead of it," Melissa said. "I'll file for divorce Monday morning. Restraining order, full custody. He'll say I'm taking his child. He assaulted someone tonight, on video, and gaslit you in public. Also on video, we have a case." Charles pulled out yet another file. "There's something else. Amber Sinclair. I had my investigator run a background check 2 weeks ago when I heard Preston was bringing a colleague to events." He slid the file across the desk. "Her real name is Amber Davis. 3 outstanding fraud warrants in Nevada. She scammed elderly investors out of $400,000 in a fake wellness pyramid scheme." Melissa's eyes went wide. "Holy shit. If Preston's been funding her lifestyle, and I believe he has, he could be charged as an accessory." Sarah stared at the file, unable to process one more piece of information. "You want to send him to prison?" Charles met her eyes. "I want to protect you and that baby. Whatever it takes." In that moment, Sarah understood. This wasn't just about property or money. This was about a dying father trying to right the wrongs he'd created by raising a son without character. Trying to protect the grandchild he'd never meet from making the same mistakes. "Okay," she whispered. "What do we do?" Charles smiled for the first time that night. "We fight. 3 days after the gala, Sarah stood in the master bedroom of the Ashford estate and tried to process her new reality. She hadn't left the property since that night. Melissa had moved into one of the guest rooms. The gates were surrounded by news vans. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. The headlines were everywhere. Page 6. Hampton's heir arrested at own father's gala. Daily Mail. Billionaire disowns son over mistress scandal. CNN. Charles Ashford gives $47 million estate to daughter-in-law. Her Instagram had exploded. Strangers sent her messages of support and hate in equal measure. Death threats appeared in her DMs. Paparazzi with telephoto lenses camped outside the gates, hoping for a photo. Sarah was nauseous. Morning sickness combined with stress was a brutal combination. Her doctor, Sarah Collins, had called that morning. "Sarah, your blood pressure is too high. You need to reduce stress or you could lose the baby." "I'm trying." "Try harder. That baby needs you calm." Sarah had hung up feeling like a failure at everything. She couldn't protect herself, couldn't protect her baby, couldn't stop the world from spinning out of control. That's when the security system buzzed. "Mrs. Mitchell, Preston Mitchell is at the gate. He's asking to speak with you." Sarah's heart jumped into her throat. "Tell him no." Melissa appeared in the doorway. "Good, you don't owe him anything." But Preston's voice came through the intercom, desperate and pleading. "Sarah, please. 5 minutes. I need to apologize. I need to explain. Please." Sarah looked at Melissa. "What if he actually means it?" "He doesn't." "You don't know that for certain." Melissa had been a divorce attorney for 12 years. She had seen this pattern 1,000 times, but she also knew Sarah needed to hear it for herself. "Babe, I know exactly what this is, but if you need to hear it, let him in. I'm staying in the room with you." Sarah took a shaky breath. "Let him in, but he doesn't get past the foyer." Preston entered looking haggard, unshaven. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked humble and broken in a way Sarah had never seen before. "Sarah, thank you for seeing me." She stood on the far side of the foyer, Melissa beside her. "You have 5 minutes." "I'm so sorry for everything I see." The gala, Amber, the way I've treated you, you were right about all of it." Sarah wanted to believe him. Part of her desperately wanted this to be real. "You mean that?" "I've been horrible. I let my ego destroy our marriage. I chose status over love. I was a coward." He took a step closer. She didn't back away. "I spent the last 3 days thinking about what I've lost, and I realized you're the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears formed in Sarah's eyes despite herself. "Preston, I want to fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off Amber completely. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." "It's not that simple." "I know, but please just give me a chance. Let me come home. We can start over." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "I love you, Sarah." For one moment, one single fragile moment, Sarah let herself hope. Maybe the humiliation had changed him. Maybe losing everything had shown him what mattered. Then Preston's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and declined the call. But Sarah saw the caller ID before the screen went dark. "Attorney Custody Docs." Her hand went cold in his. "What was that?" "Nothing, just your attorney, custody documents?" Preston's face showed his mistake. "Sarah, let me explain." Melissa stepped him forward. "You son of a bitch. You're filing for custody?" "I have a right to see my child." Sarah pulled her hand away. "I haven't even told you I'm pregnant." The silence was damning. Preston's carefully constructed facade cracked. "My mother saw you at Dr. Collins's office yesterday. She put 2 and 2 together." "You've been having me followed?" "For your protection." "Get out." Preston's mask fell away completely. The real Preston emerged, the one she'd been living with for 5 years. "This isn't over. That baby is my child. Half of everything you have should be mine. You stole my inheritance." "I didn't steal anything. I have what Charles gave me." "Exactly. My father, my inheritance. You manipulated a dying old man." Melissa moved between them. "Get out now." Preston turned to leave, then looked back. His face was ugly with rage. "You'll hear from my lawyers. I'm filing for emergency custody. I have a psychiatrist who will testify you're mentally unfit. I have evidence you're endangering the pregnancy, and I have my mother's support. On what grounds? Sarah's voice shook. On the grounds that you're an unstable gold digger who seduced a dying man into disinheriting his own son. The courts will see right through you. He left. The door slammed behind him. Sarah collapsed, hyperventilating. This was the second despair peak, the moment when she realized the fight was just beginning. 2 hours later, Vivian Ashford arrived. She swept through the foyer in Chanel, her silver hair perfectly styled, her face a mask of controlled fury. We need to talk. Woman to woman. Sarah was still shaking from Preston's visit. I have nothing to say to you. You will when you hear what I'm offering. Melissa tried to intervene. She's not interested in... Vivian pulled out a checkbook. Actual paper, like something from another era. $10 million, right now. Sign away all custody rights to the baby, leave Preston alone, and disappear. Sarah stared at her. You're trying to buy my child? I'm trying to save an Ashford heir from being raised by you. Get out of my house. Vivian's smile was cold. Your house, for now. But when Preston contests Charles's mental capacity, and believe me, he will, all of this goes away. Melissa stepped forward. Charles was examined by 3 separate physicians. Charles was on morphine when he made those transfers. Documented. His oncologist will testify he wasn't of sound mind. That's a lie. Mama says is that a dying man gives away $50 million to his son's wife days before a major family event? That screams undue influence. Sarah's voice was small. I didn't even know about the house until... Prove it. Oh, wait, you can't, because it'll be your word against a dead man's. Vivian let that sink in. Charles has maybe 4 months left. When he dies, we'll have the will overturned. Preston will get everything, and you'll get nothing except a custody battle you can't afford. Charles is setting up a trust for the baby. That'll be contested too. Ashford money goes to Ashford blood, not some designer's brat. Melissa moved forward. You need to leave. Now. Or what? You'll call the police? I'm a 65-year-old grandmother. They'll laugh at you. Vivian leaned close to Sarah, her voice dropping to a whisper that Melissa couldn't quite hear. I buried 1 daughter-in-law already. Don't make me bury 2. She left as elegantly as she'd arrived. Sarah turned to Melissa. She threatened me. Did she threaten me? I don't know if that was a threat or just rich people talk, but either way, we're documenting everything. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Mitchell, this is page 6. We're running a story tomorrow about your affair with Charles Ashford. Would you like to comment? Sarah's blood went cold. What? There's no affair. We have sources saying you've been living at the estate for 3 weeks, sleeping in the master bedroom. Charles gave me the house. This is insane. So you deny the affair? Sarah hung up, her hand shaking so badly she dropped the phone. What was that? Melissa asked. They're saying I'm having an affair with Charles. They're going to print it. The next morning, the headlines confirmed her worst fears. Did Charles Ashford give $47 million to his mistress? Friends say Sarah Mitchell seduced dying billionaire. Preston Mitchell, my wife stole my inheritance. The social media reaction was brutal. She's a gold digger, this is so obvious. Pregnant by the son, sleeping with the father, nasty. Poor Preston, his wife and dad betrayed him. Sarah's Instagram was flooded with hate. Death threats filled her DMs. The paparazzi outside the gates grew from 5 to 20. That afternoon, Sarah went into the bathroom and saw blood. She screamed for Melissa. Something's wrong, the baby. Melissa called 911 while Sarah sat on the bathroom floor, crying and praying and feeling everything slip away. This was the 3rd despair peak, the moment when she thought she would lose everything that mattered. The emergency room was cold and too bright. Sarah lay on the examination table while Dr. Collins moved the ultrasound wand across her stomach. The silence stretched unbearably. Then the heartbeat filled the room, fast and strong and alive. Sarah sobbed with relief. Dr. Collins's face was stern. Sarah, you're having a threatened miscarriage. The baby's heartbeat is there, but it's weak. You need complete bed rest, no stress. I can't. They're destroying me, the news, Preston's lawyers. If you don't rest, you will lose this baby. Is that what you want? No, of course not. Then you need to choose. Fight them or save your child. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She couldn't do both. She couldn't protect herself and protect the baby. She had to choose. That's when Charles appeared in the doorway. He was in a wheelchair now, oxygen tank beside him. He looked thinner than he had 3 days ago. The cancer was eating him alive. Everyone out. I need to speak with Sarah alone. Dr. Collins hesitated. Mr. Ashford, she needs rest. I'll make it quick. The room cleared. Charles wheeled himself close to the bed and took Sarah's hand. I saw the news, the lies, all of it. Charles, we never, I know, but they don't care about truth. They care about narrative. Sarah was crying again. I can't fight them anymore. I'm going to lose the baby. Maybe I should just give them what they want. Take the 10 million and disappear. No, Charles's voice was sharp. You listen to me. I didn't give you that house so you could surrender it. I gave it to you so you'd have power. What power? They're going to take everything. They're going to prove you weren't in your right mind. Not if I finish what I started. He pulled out a document from the bag attached to his wheelchair. Tomorrow I'm holding a press conference. At the estate, I'm going to tell the truth. About Preston, about why I transferred the deed, about their lies. You're too sick. I'm dying anyway. Might as well go out fighting. He coughed violently. Blood flecked his lips. He wiped it away impatiently. I'm going to announce that I've revised my will. Everything, the foundation, the assets, goes to your baby, with ironclad trusts they can't break. Preston will destroy you. He already has, but he won't destroy you, or that child. Charles pulled out another document. This is my video deposition, made yesterday while I was still coherent, explaining everything. If I die before the press conference, Blake will release it. Charles, please don't. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you to fight. Use the power I gave you. Be the mother that baby deserves. The next day, the front lawn of the Ashford estate was packed with media. 50 news outlets, cameras, reporters shouting questions. The feeding frenzy had reached critical mass. Charles sat in his wheelchair at a podium, Blake Harper on one side, Melissa on the other. Sarah watched from inside the house, too afraid to appear publicly, her hand pressed against the window. Charles's voice, amplified by the microphone, was still strong. My name is Charles Ashford. I'm 68 years old. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and I'm here to set the record straight. The cameras focused. The reporters quieted. Over the past week, my daughter-in-law has been accused of seduction, gold digging, and theft. None of it is true. A reporter shouted, Mr. Ashford, did you give Sarah Mitchell the Southampton estate? Yes, 5 years ago, as a wedding gift, not last week. 5 years ago, when Preston married her, I saw something in Sarah that my son never appreciated. Kindness, integrity, loyalty. Why didn't you give it to Preston? Because I knew he'd weaponize it, use it to control her. I was right. Another reporter, are you having an affair with Sarah Mitchell? Charles actually laughed, though it turned into a cough. I'm dying. I can barely walk. And she's 36 years younger than me. Use your common sense. Then why is she living in the master bedroom? It's her house. She can sleep wherever she wants. I've been in the guest cottage for 3 weeks. Charles pulled out a folder. I'm revising my will. Everything I own, $4.2 billion, is going to my grandchild, Sarah's baby, because unlike my son, that child will be raised with values. The press erupted. Questions flew from every direction. You're disinheriting Preston? Completely. He assaulted 2 women on video. He's a narcissist and a bully, and I will not reward that behavior with billions. He says you're not mentally competent. Charles held up documents. I graduated Yale Law School. I built a tech empire. I've passed every cognitive test my doctors administered. I am of sound mind, and I am making this choice freely. He pulled out another folder. This is a notarized statement from 3 physicians confirming my mental capacity. This is a video deposition explaining my reasoning. Then came the bombshell. And this is evidence that my son has been embezzling from the Ashford Foundation. $470,000 over 2 years. I've turned it over to the FBI. The press went wild. Inside the house, Sarah watched Charles defend her to the world, and something shifted inside her chest. She had spent 5 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient, letting Preston's narrative define to her. No more. She touched her stomach where the baby grew, still holding on despite everything. "We're going to fight," she whispered. "Your grandfather is showing me how." 2 months later, Sarah sat in a courtroom, visibly pregnant at 20 weeks. The morning sickness had finally eased. The threatened miscarriage had stabilized. But the battle was far from over. Preston's attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, stood before the judge. "Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell is seeking full custody based on Mrs. Mitchell's documented mental instability." Melissa was on her feet instantly. "Objection. There's no documentation of any mental instability. We have testimony from a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist Preston paid to say whatever he wanted." Meanwhile, Sarah has 6 character witnesses, medical records showing a healthy pregnancy, and video evidence of Preston's assault captured by multiple sources. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, looked unimpressed. "I've reviewed the videos." Continue. Preston took the stand. He was dressed impeccably, playing the role of concerned father. "My wife manipulated my dying father into giving her everything. She's using this baby to secure wealth she never earned." Melissa's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Mitchell, were you or were you not arrested for assault on May 26th? "That was a misunderstanding." "Yes or no?" "Yes, but—" "And did you or did you not embezzle $470,000 from your father's foundation?" "I borrowed money I intended to repay." "So yes. And Mr. Mitchell, how many affairs did you have during your marriage?" Preston's attorney objected. "Relevance. It speaks to his character and fitness as a parent," Melissa countered. The judge nodded. "I'll allow it." Preston shifted in his seat. One, would you like me to present evidence of 3 different women?" Preston's face reddened. "I may have been unfaithful, but that doesn't make me a bad father." "You've never been a father. The baby isn't born yet. But you've proven yourself a terrible husband and a criminal. No further questions." Then Charles testified. He was wheeled in, visibly deteriorating. The cancer had progressed rapidly, but his mind was sharp. Preston's attorney tried to break him. "Mr. Ashford, were you on pain medication when you transferred the property?" "Yes, morphine, prescribed dosage, which can cause confusion." "I wasn't confused. I was deliberate. I've been planning that transfer since the day they got married." Charles looked directly at Preston. "Because I saw my son berate his bride during the rehearsal dinner. I saw him ignore her during the ceremony. I saw him treat her like property. And I knew one day she'd need protection from him." His voice grew stronger. "I just didn't know how right I was." The judge took less than 10 minutes to decide. "I'm ruling in favor of Mrs. Mitchell. Full custody. Mr. Mitchell may have supervised visits after the child is born, pending completion of anger management and parenting classes." Preston stood up, face red. "This is bullshit. She stole my inheritance. That baby is mine." "Mr. Mitchell, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." "She's a gold-digging whore who—" "Bailiff, remove Mr. Mitchell from my courtroom." As security dragged Preston out, he screamed at Sarah, "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll destroy you." Sarah sat quietly, hands on her growing belly, and felt nothing but relief. 3 weeks later, Blake Harper called. "Sarah, you need to come to the hospital. It's Charles. He's asking for you." Sarah drove herself, Melissa beside her. They found Charles in hospice care, barely conscious. The room smelled of antiseptic and something else, something Sarah recognized from her mother's final days. The smell of dying. She took his hand. "I'm here, Charles." His eyes opened slowly. "Did we win?" "We won. Full custody." A weak smile. "Good. The baby?" "Strong, healthy. It's a girl." "A girl." His smile widened slightly. "Perfect." His breathing was labored. Each word cost him. "What will you name her?" Sarah's tear fell freely. "Charlotte. After you." "Charlotte. Beautiful. He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. Promise me you'll teach her what I couldn't teach Preston. What's that? That love is more important than legacy. I promise. And Sarah? Yes? You were the best thing that ever happened to this family. The heart monitor's beep became a steady tone. Charles Ashford died holding Sarah's hand at 6:42 in the evening on August 3rd. 6 months later, Sarah gave birth to Charlotte Grace Mitchell at 2:17 in the morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. Melissa was there crying happy tears. She's beautiful. Sarah held her daughter and looked into eyes that reminded her of Charles. She has his eyes. Blake Harper arrived hours later with an envelope. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Charles left instructions. I was to give you this the day Charlotte was born. Sarah opened the letter with one hand, Charlotte sleeping against her chest. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Charles's. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, I've died and Charlotte has been born. 2 endings, 1 beginning. By now you know that everything, the foundation, the assets, the properties, belong to your daughter, $4.2 billion. It's an absurd amount of money. Use it wisely, but more importantly, teach Charlotte that wealth without character is worthless. Teach her to be kind, to fight for what's right, to protect those who can't protect themselves. You've already shown her all of that by being her mother. The house, your house, I hope you fill it with love, with laughter, with everything I failed to give Preston. You were the daughter I never had. Charlotte will be the granddaughter I never deserved but hoped for anyway. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Love always, Charles. Sarah cried until she couldn't cry anymore, holding her daughter and the letter from a man who had saved them both. 5 years later, Charlotte was 5 years old when she first asked about the portrait. It hung in the main hall of the estate, massive and imposing. Charles Ashford in his prime, sharp-eyed and commanding, before the cancer had taken him. Mommy, who's that man? Sarah knelt beside her daughter. Charlotte had Charles's eyes and his quiet strength. She was fearless and kind in equal measure. That's your grandfather. He was the bravest man I ever knew. Why? Sarah smiled. Because he chose love over everything else, and he taught me to do the same. Charlotte studied the portrait seriously, then ran off to play in the gardens. Sarah stood alone in front of Charles's image and touched the frame gently. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. The Charlotte Ashford Foundation now operated 127 children's hospitals across the United States. They had invested $890 million in cancer research. Sarah served as CEO, working from the estate study where Charles had first told her the truth. Preston had served 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement. He was released last year, now working as a pharmaceutical sales representative in Phoenix. He had no contact with Charlotte. The court had terminated his parental rights after he violated the restraining order 3 times. Vivian had attempted to contest the will. The case was dismissed. She had never met her granddaughter. Amber Sinclair was extradited to Nevada and served 2 years for fraud. She had tried to sell her story to tabloids, but no one cared anymore. Sarah never remarried. People asked sometimes, mostly at charity events or board meetings. She always gave the same answer. I'm exactly where I need to be. On the 5th anniversary of Charles's death, Sarah took Charlotte to his grave. They brought flowers, Charlotte's carefully drawn picture of the two of them, and a letter Sarah had written. Charlotte placed the picture on the headstone. Do you think he can see us? I think he can. What was he like, really? Sarah thought about how to answer. Charlotte deserved the truth. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He raised a son who turned out to be a terrible person. But when it mattered most, when someone needed him, he showed up. He fought. He protected the people who couldn't protect themselves. Like you protected me? Sarah pulled her daughter close. Like he taught me to protect you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Charlotte asked the question that Sarah had been waiting for. Why did grandfather give you the house? Sarah had prepared for this conversation for years. Charlotte deserved the whole truth. Because my first husband, your biological father, was cruel to me. He made me feel small and worthless. Your grandfather saw that, even when I tried to hide it. So he gave me something that would always be mine. something no one could take away. He gave me power when I didn't know I needed it. Did it work? Yes, it worked. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. I'm glad he gave you the house, otherwise I might not be here. Sarah's throat tightened. You're the smartest 5-year-old I know. Melissa says I get it from you. Melissa's biased. She's your godmother. They stayed until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. As they walked back to the car, Charlotte slipped her hand into Sarah's. Mom? Yeah? When I grow up, I want to be like grandfather. I want to help people who need it. Sarah's heart swelled with pride and grief in equal measure. Then we'll make sure you can. That's what the foundation is for. That's what all of this is for. That night, after Charlotte was asleep, Sarah sat in Charles's old study and opened the safe. Inside was the video deposition he had made before he died. She had watched it only once, the day after his funeral. Tonight felt like the right time to watch it again. Charles's face filled the screen, gaunt but determined. Sarah, if you're watching this, I'm gone. And I hope you've raised Charlotte to be everything Preston wasn't. I want you to know why I did what I did. Not just the house, but all of it. I built Ashford Technologies because I wanted to matter. I wanted to leave something behind. For years, I thought that meant passing everything to Preston. Blood legacy, family dynasty, all the things rich people convince themselves matter. He paused to cough, the sound harsh even through the recording. But legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who you leave behind, the kind of people they become, the choices they make. Preston had every advantage, the best schools, the best opportunities, unlimited money, and he became cruel, entitled. Exactly the kind of person who makes the world worse. Charles leaned closer to the camera. Then I met you and I saw something different. You were kind to the staff. You volunteered at hospitals. You visited your mother's grave every week. You didn't want anything from me except respect. So I gave you the house because I knew you'd need it. I gave you my fortune because I knew Charlotte would need it. But most importantly, I gave you my trust because I knew you'd earned it. His eyes were wet. Teach Charlotte that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. Teach her that character matters more than money. Teach her to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. And most importantly, teach her that love, real love, is about protection, not possession. He smiled, and for a moment he looked younger. You saved my life, Sarah. Not literally, but you gave my death meaning. You showed me what legacy really is. It's not buildings or money or family names. It's the difference you make in someone's life when they need you most. Thank you for letting me make that difference for you and Charlotte. Thank you for being strong enough to accept help when you needed it. And thank you for being the daughter I should have raised instead of the son I did. The video ended. Sarah sat in the darkness of the study, tears streaming down her face, and whispered to the empty room. We're doing it, Charles. Charlotte is everything you hoped she'd be, and I'm trying every day to be worthy of what you gave us. When Charlotte turned 10, Sarah decided it was time to tell her the whole story. They sat together in the garden where Charlotte had played as a child, now old enough to understand complexity and nuance. You know the basics, Sarah began. Your grandfather gave me the house. Your biological father was cruel. We went to court and won custody, but there's more to it than that. Charlotte listened with the serious attention she brought to everything important. Sarah told her about the wine-soaked dress, about Preston's gaslighting in front of 200 people, about Amber's cruelty and Vivian's threats, about Charles's slap heard round the ballroom, about the pregnancy that nearly ended in miscarriage because of stress. You were fighting for both of us, Charlotte said quietly. I was, but I didn't know how to fight until your grandfather showed me. He gave me power, but more importantly, he taught me how to use it, not for revenge, for protection. Do you hate my biological father? Sarah considered the question carefully. No, I pity him. He had every advantage in the world and wasted all of it. He could have been someone who mattered, someone who made the world better. Instead, he became someone people avoid. That's a sad way to live. Do you think he ever thinks about me? Honestly, I don't know. But I know this. You have never lacked for love. You have me, you have Melissa, you have the memory of your grandfather, and you have a foundation named after you that helps thousands of children every year. That's more family than most people ever get. Charlotte nodded, processing. What happened to Amber, the woman who threw the wine? She went to prison for fraud. Last I heard, she was working at a call center in Nevada. And grandmother Vivian? Sarah hadn't heard Charlotte use that term before. She's your grandmother by blood, but she's never tried to meet you. She sends a Christmas card every year with no return address. That's the extent of her involvement. Do you think she regrets it? I think she regrets losing access to you and the foundation money. I'm not sure she regrets her choices. Some people never do. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun move across the gardens. Finally, Charlotte asked the question Sarah had known was coming. Do you wish grandfather had lived to meet me? Every single day. He would have loved you so much, Charlotte. He would have been so proud of who you're becoming. Tell me something about him that not many people know. Sarah smiled. He loved old movies, black and white films from the 1940s and 50s. He said they reminded him that good storytelling doesn't need special effects, just real emotion. We watched them together sometimes, in the months before he died. He'd explain the historical context, the acting techniques, why certain scenes mattered. What was his favorite? It's a Wonderful Life. He said it reminded him that the most important thing in life is the impact you have on others. That stuck with me. Charlotte stood up and offered her hand to Sarah. Come on, let's go watch it. They spent that evening curled up together in the screening room, watching George Bailey discover the value of his existence, and Sarah saw Charles in every frame. The message he'd tried to teach her, the legacy he'd left behind. The next morning, Charlotte asked if she could visit Charles's grave alone. Sarah hesitated but agreed. Charlotte was responsible, and the cemetery was private and safe. When Charlotte returned an hour later, her eyes were red from crying. What did you tell him? Sarah asked gently. I told him thank you for protecting you when you needed it, for making sure I could exist, for teaching you how to be brave. Sarah pulled her daughter close. He'd be so happy to know you said that. I also told him I'd take care of the foundation when I'm old enough. I'd make sure his name meant something good, that people would remember him for helping others, not just for being rich. Sarah's tears fell freely. That's exactly what he would have wanted. On Charlotte's 18th birthday, Sarah took her to the lawyer's office where Blake Harper, now in his 70s but still sharp, explained the trust. Charlotte, when you turn 25, you'll gain full control of the Ashford fortune, approximately $5.8 billion, including growth from investments. Until then, your mother serves as trustee, but today we need to discuss what you want to do with it. Charlotte had been preparing for this conversation for years. She pulled out a folder, her own folder, carefully organized. I want to expand the children's hospitals to every state. I want to triple the cancer research funding. I want to establish scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds who want to study medicine or social work. And I want to create a domestic violence shelter network with resources for women who need to escape dangerous situations. Blake looked at Sarah with barely concealed pride. She really is Charles's granddaughter. In all the ways that matter, Sarah agreed. Charlotte graduated summa cum laude from Yale with a degree in public health. She spent 2 years working directly in the foundation's hospitals, not as the heiress, but as a volunteer coordinator. She wanted to understand the work from the ground up. On her 25th birthday, she took full control of the foundation. Her first act was to rename the main conference room the Charles Ashford Memorial Wing. Her second was to establish the Sarah Mitchell Fellowship for women rebuilding their lives after leaving abusive relationships. For the woman who taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, she said at the dedication ceremony, it's wisdom. Sarah cried through the entire speech. When Sarah turned 60, Charlotte threw a party at the estate. The same ballroom where wine had been thrown 30 years ago, now filled with people who loved them. Melissa, now 70 and finally retired from law. Blake Harper, 90 and still giving advice. The staff who had stayed with them for decades. The foundation board members. The families whose children had been helped by their hospitals. Charlotte stood to give a toast. 30 years ago in this room, my grandfather made a choice. He chose character over blood. He chose protection over possession. He chose my mother when his own son had rejected her. And in doing so, he saved two lives, mine and hers. The room was silent, listening. My mother has spent 30 years teaching me what grandfather taught her, that wealth is responsibility, that love is action, that legacy is measured in the people you protect and the difference you make. Tonight, I want to announce something. Charlotte pulled out a document. I'm establishing the Charles and Sarah Ashford Endowment, $1 billion dedicated to continuing their work long after I'm gone. Because legacy isn't about what we build. It's about what we leave behind that continues to help others. The room erupted in applause. Sarah stood to embrace her daughter, tears streaming down her face. Later, when the party had quieted and guests had filtered out, Sarah and Charlotte stood together in front of Charles's portrait. Do you think he knows? Charlotte asked. Everything we've built? I think he does, and I think he's proud. I wish I could have met him. In a way, you have. Every time you make a choice that helps someone who can't help themselves, you're meeting him. Every time you choose kindness over cruelty, protection over possession, you're knowing him. He lives in the choices we make. Charlotte linked her arm through Sarah's. Tell me again, the whole story, from the beginning. So Sarah did. She told her about the bathroom floor in Brooklyn with 3 positive pregnancy tests, about the rental dress and the lies, about Amber's cruelty and Preston's gaslighting, about Charles's slap that echoed through history, about the ownership revelation that changed everything. She told her about the pregnancy that nearly ended in miscarriage, about Vivian's threats and the media's lies, about Charles's press conference and his video deposition, about the court battle and the custody victory. She told her about Charles's death, holding his hand as he took his last breath, about the letter he'd left for Charlotte's birth, about the 5 years of building something that mattered. And she told her about love, real love, the kind that protects instead of possesses, the kind that empowers instead of diminishes, the kind that Charles had shown her and she had shown Charlotte. When she finished, Charlotte was crying. What an incredible story. It's your story too. You're part of it, the best part. They stood together in the ballroom that had witnessed so much pain and transformation, and Sarah felt the weight of 3 decades settle into something like peace. The wine stain was long gone, professionally cleaned from marble that still gleamed. The guests who had witnessed that night had moved on with their lives, but the video still circulated. 47 million views and counting. The top comment, pinned for years, read, "I was at that party. What happened after this video changed my entire life. Sarah Mitchell is a hero. Charles Ashford was a legend, and Preston can rot. Justice isn't always fast, but it's always worth the fight." Sarah had read that comment 1,000 times over the years. Tonight it hit different. "Mom?" Charlotte's voice pulled her back to the present. "Yeah? When I have children someday, I'm going to tell them this story about their great-grandfather who chose love over legacy, about their grandmother who found her strength when she needed it most, about how our family wasn't built on blood or money, but on choices." Sarah pulled her daughter close. "That's the legacy that matters, not the money, not the houses, the choices we make when someone needs us." They walked through the mansion together, turning off lights, checking locks, preparing for bed. The same routine Sarah had done for 30 years, but it never got old. This was home, not because of the 40 acres or the oceanfront property or the $47 million valuation, because it was where she had found her power, where she had protected her daughter, where Charles's memory lived in every corner and every choice. In the master bedroom, Sarah looked out at the ocean, the same view she had seen on that first terrible night, wine-soaked and humiliated and pregnant with a secret. She thought about Preston sometimes, though not often. She had heard he remarried, divorced again, moved from city to city, chasing opportunities that never materialized. He was 66 now, working a middle management job somewhere in the Midwest. He had tried to contact Charlotte twice, once on her 10th birthday, once on her 18th. Charlotte had declined both times. "He's not my father," she had said simply. "He's a stranger who shares my mayidim. My real family is you and Melissa and grandfather's memory. That's enough." Vivian had died 2 years ago, alone in a nursing home, surrounded by expensive things but no people who cared. She had left her estate to a cat sanctuary. perhaps her one decent choice. Amber had tried to write a tell-all book. No publisher would touch it. The last Sarah heard, she was managing a yoga studio in Reno. All of them had faded into irrelevance. Not because Sarah had destroyed them, but because they had destroyed themselves. Character Charles had taught her always reveals itself eventually. On the 30th anniversary of Charles's death, Sarah and Charlotte held a memorial at his grave. They invited everyone whose lives he had touched. Former employees, foundation board members, families whose children had been treated at Charlotte Ashford hospitals, people who had received scholarships in his name. Hundreds came. Charlotte spoke first, her voice strong and clear. I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born, but I've known him my entire life through his choices, through the protection he gave my mother when she needed it most, through the foundation that bears my name but carries his values, through every hospital bed, every research grant, every scholarship, every life changed for the better. She paused, looking at the headstone. Grandfather taught my mother that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you leave behind and what they choose to do with what you've given them. Today, 30 years after his death, his legacy lives in 127 hospitals, in thousands of children who receive care they otherwise couldn't afford, in hundreds of researchers working to cure cancer, in women who found safety when they needed to escape danger. Charlotte's voice broke slightly, but most of all, his legacy lives in my mother, who took the power he gave her and used it not for revenge, but for protection. Not for herself, but for others. That's the kind of legacy that lasts forever. Sarah stood next, unable to speak for a long moment. When she finally found her voice, it was steady. Charles Ashford saved my life twice. Once when he gave me the house, though I didn't know it yet, and once when he showed me how to use the power I had. He taught me that accepting help isn't weakness, that fighting back isn't cruelty, that protecting yourself and your child is the most important thing you can do. She looked out at the crowd. I was 32 years old, pregnant, humiliated, and convinced I deserved everything my husband had done to me. Charles looked at me and saw someone worth protecting, someone worth fighting for, someone who could become strong if given the chance. Tears streamed down her face. He was right, and I spent the last 30 years proving him right. Not just for me, for Charlotte, for every woman who's ever felt powerless in the face of cruelty, for everyone who needs to know that one person believing in you can change everything. She placed her hand on the headstone. Thank you, Charles, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for protecting me when I didn't know I needed protection, for giving me a daughter who will carry your legacy into the future, for teaching me that love isn't possession, it's freedom. That night, Sarah sat in the study one final time with Charles's video deposition. She had watched it hundreds of times over the years, but tonight felt different. Final somehow. Charles's recorded face filled the screen. Sarah, if you're watching this, I'm gone. Sarah smiled through her tears. Yes, you are, but you are still here too. I want you to know why I did what I did. I know now. It took me years to fully understand, but I know. Legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who you leave behind. You left us, Charles, me and Charlotte, and we've spent 30 years making sure your legacy was everything it should have been. Teach Charlotte that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. She knows. She's teaching her generation the same thing. Thank you for letting me make a difference in your life. Sarah reached out and touched the screen. Thank you for being there when I needed you most. Thank you for believing in me before I believed in myself. Thank you for Charlotte. Thank you for everything. The video ended. Sarah turned off the monitor and sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of 30 years settle into something like completion. She had been 32 when Charles gave her the house, 32 when she stood in that ballroom, wine-soaked and humiliated, thinking her life was over. She was 62 now. Charlotte was 30. The foundation had helped hundreds of thousands of people. The fortune had grown to nearly $6 billion, all of it dedicated to helping others. And Preston? Preston was 66, alone, irrelevant, forgotten by everyone except as a cautionary tale about what happens when you choose cruelty over character. Sarah stood and walked to the window. The ocean stretched out endlessly under the moonlight. The same ocean she had stared at 30 years ago, clutching trust documents she didn't understand, pregnant with a daughter she was terrified she'd lose. But she hadn't lost Charlotte. She had raised her to be exactly what Charles hoped: kind, strong, dedicated to using her privilege to help others. And Sarah herself had become someone she never imagined possible. Not just a survivor, but someone who thrived, someone who built something that mattered, someone who transformed humiliation into power, pain into purpose, fear into strength. She thought about that night 30 years ago, the wine spreading across her dress like blood, Preston's voice telling her she was dramatic and unstable, Amber's cruelty, the 200 witnesses with their phones recording her humiliation. Then she thought about what came after. Charles's slap, the ownership revelation, the "I want them to leave" and the applause that followed. That was the night her life changed. Not because of money or property, but because one person believed in her enough to give her power when she needed it most. And she had spent 30 years honoring that gift. Sarah opened the window and breathed in the salt air. "We did it, Charles," she whispered to the night. "Charlotte and I, we took what you gave us and made it matter. We protected people who needed protection. We built something that will last long after we're all gone. We turned your final act of love into a legacy that changes lives every single day." She closed her eyes and felt, for the first time in 30 years, completely at peace. "Rest easy. Your work is done. And it was good work, the best work. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for showing us what love really means." The ocean whispered back, endless and eternal. Sarah stood at that window for a long time, saying goodbye to the past and hello to whatever came next. Tomorrow, Charlotte would announce a new initiative, a billion-dollar investment in mental health resources for domestic abuse survivors. It would be called the Charles Ashford Courage Project. Tomorrow, Sarah would speak at a conference about her journey from victim to victor, from powerless to powerful. Tomorrow, they would continue building on the foundation Charles had laid 30 years ago in a ballroom filled with witnesses. But tonight, Sarah simply stood at the window of her home, the one Charles had given her when she needed it most, and let herself feel grateful. For the house that protected her, for the daughter who thrived, for the foundation that helped thousands, for the man who believed in her, for the 30 years of purpose and meaning, for the life she had built from the ashes of humiliation. Outside, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm. Inside, Sarah Mitchell stood in the house that saved her life, surrounded by the legacy of a man who chose love over blood, protection over possession, character over dynasty. And she knew with absolute certainty that she had honored that choice every single day for 30 years. The story that began with wine and humiliation had ended with purpose and peace. That was the legacy that mattered. That was the story worth telling. That was the life worth living.